My next two stories focus on 9/11 because we are less than 6 months away from the anniversary of the 9/11 attacks, and it's always important to remember why we question that. This is actually a bit of positive news. In the weeks following September 11, 2001 terror attacks, the U.S. government rounded up several hundred individuals suspected of ties to terrorism. The arrests were allegedly based on tips received through a hotline. In total, 762 people were detained around the country. The detainees were held between 3 to 8 months in facilities in New York and New Jersey. Some individuals were even deported despite being found to have no ties to terrorism. No ties to terrorism. Jailed, imprisoned, and deported. Woo, this is a free country. Since that time, not one U.S. government official has been held accountable. However, this might change with a recent ruling from a federal appeals court. ABC News reports that the Second U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals has issued a 2-to-1 ruling that will allow a lawsuit against former top U.S. officials, including then Attorney General John Ashcroft and FBI Director Robert Mueller. The judges wrote that the treatment of detainees, such as solitary confinement 23 hours a day with regular strip searches because their perceived faith or race placed them in the group targeted for recruitment by Al-Qaeda, violated their constitutional rights. The ruling says the suffering endured by those who were imprisoned merely because they were caught up in the hysteria of the days immediately following 9/11 is not without a remedy. Rachel Miropol, an attorney with the Center for Constitutional Rights, said the decision may shed light on how then-President George W. Bush handled decision-making in the days following the attacks. So, the detainees' lawyers presented evidence that they were subject to being slammed into walls, bending or twisting of their arms, hands, wrists, and fingers, stepping on their leg restraints, leaving them handcuffed and shackled in cells, insulting their religion, and making humiliating sexual comments during their strip searches. Just good old American behavior. Originally filed in federal court in April 2002, the lawsuit now has 8 plaintiffs, all of who are Middle Eastern, North African, or of South Asian origin. Each of these plaintiffs was deported after being cleared of wrongdoing. And in her dissenting vote, Circuit Judge Rina Raggi said the government's actions, even if mistaken, were justified because of the possibility of further attacks. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And this is what the judge said. It is difficult to imagine a public good more demanding of decisiveness or more tolerant of reasonable, even if mistaken, judgments than the protection of this nation and its people from further terrorist attacks in the immediate aftermath of the horrific events of 9/11. So she's saying, oh, because we were all freaked the fuck out and not using our brain and not looking at the attack and just listening to propaganda and the possibility that there might be another attack, fear, then it's justified to take innocent people, to tie them up, put them in a cage, beat them up, strangle them, make sexually lewd comments at them, make fun of their beliefs, and then ship them out of the country even though they did nothing wrong. Oh, that's all justified. Right. All right. That's what they say. Have fear, no worry. But hopefully that lawsuit will lead to something. I mean, I got to put some hope or some faith somewhere, right? There's lawsuits when they get filed about 9/11, whether it's the victims' family members or to release the 28 pages or to sue people for the way they were treated after 9/11. I'm kind of like, part of me is like, yes, 9/11's being talked about. The issue won't die, right? But then at the same time, like, yeah, right. They're not going to find any wrongdoing. They're just going to investigate themselves and say, whoops, nothing wrong. But I did another article for Truth in Media called Rand Paul Reminds Us Why Questioning 9/11 Still Matters. And no, I don't support Rand Paul. But hey, if he's talking about 9/11, which is something I do care about, and questioning 9/11, which is what I do support, absolutely I'm going to write about it. On June 2nd, Senator Rand Paul stood with family members of the victims of the 9/11 terrorist attacks as he announced new bipartisan legislation that would force President Obama to declassify 28 pages of the Senate investigation into the attacks of 9/11. Senator Paul was joined at the press conference by Terry Strada, who is the national chair of the 9/11 Families and Survivors United for Justice Against Terrorism. She lost her daughter, Caitlin Strada, and Abraham Scott was also there, who is the husband of a victim. Also present were U.S. Representatives Walter Jones, Stephen Lynch, and Thomas Massey, and former U.S. Senator Bob Graham. This bill is called the Transparency for the Families of 9/11 Victims and Survivors Act of 2015, and it was also sponsored by 2 Democrats, Senator Ron Wyden and Kristen Gillibrand. And this is, of course, only the latest attempt by several people, family members, and representatives to try to get Obama to follow his word and to release these 28 pages, because those who have seen the pages have said they point to Saudi Arabia. And if we could just get that out in the open, I do think there are other nations involved. Likely elements of the U.S. government were also involved, and some point a finger at Israel as well. There's also Pakistani funding. There's a lot of things we don't know about 9/11. We're not going to know the truth until we're willing to shine a light on some ugly truths. But of course, this would force the United States citizens and government to rethink their relationship with Saudi Arabia. And this all assumes that they're just innocent and playing along. But what I really do believe is that there's a lot more of a malicious intent behind these things. That's why they won't. That's why they lie. That's why they won't shine a light on it, is because they're doing it on purpose. They're doing it on purpose. They wanted the 9/11 attacks to happen. Sorry, I'm just going a little crazy. When introducing the bill and standing at the press conference, Rand Paul said, "I stand with my colleagues today to call for the release of the final 28 pages of the 9/11 congressional inquiry. I firmly believe the family members of the victims of the September 11th attacks have the right to know the details surrounding the tragedies that occurred on that day." And at this press conference, Paul also said, "Information revealed over the year does raise questions about Saudi Arabia's support, or whether their support might have been supportive to these al-Qaeda terrorists. We cannot let page after page of blanked out documents be obscured behind a veil, leading these families to wonder if there is additional information surrounding these horrible attacks." Terry Strada of the 9/11 Family Members Organization said, "Nearly every significant element that led to the attacks of September 11th points to Saudi Arabia." Sounds like there's a legitimate reason to question it. Sounds like the people who say that they know what's going on about 9/11 don't want to challenge it, don't know what they're talking about. They don't know what they're talking about. They don't like to listen, right? Well, alright, moving on. That's my 9/11 rant and stories.